Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on AR and VR in real estate and constructions. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Rob, Dr. William, Mr. Shankar, Mr. Dan, Dr. Eric, and Professor David Smith and Mr. Bhivash from India. So I want to start from Professor Rob. Today today I want to discuss on, or our whole team want to discuss on AR VR in real estate and construction industries. You are from the a big corporation, you are working for different corporations, business analyst. How you want to analyze today's topic?
Well, so in terms of the companies I work with, the company that probably is the most advanced in terms of actually using AR, VR in real estate is NVIDIA. They're one of the leading vendors driving the metaverse and the idea of creating digital twins of pretty much everything on the planet. Their latest two headquarters buildings were fully rendered first and explored in VR before they ever laid a stone. In fact, they were able to even determine how the light was going to flow in the building and readjust the natural light sources so that they could keep costs for lighting down and keep the heat from coming into the buildings. And they're impressive looking structures. When we sold our last house, we went to a company called Matterport. And they came in with 3D cameras and scanned the entire inside of the house. And then a buyer could go to the Matterport website and they could look at the house as if they were there, walk into a room, look around the room. And so that's used increasingly for real estate sales. So that, and I imagine it's much more popular during the pandemic because a lot of people wandering through your house during a pandemic is not my idea of a good time. So you can do it virtually and safely. The underlying promise with and those are pretty much VR implementations. AR has had some difficulty moving into real estate. The promise was that we'd put on AR glasses and you'd be able to do things like space management. Well, interior space management at a corporation, interior decorating for a home. But you could walk in and you could place furniture, you could place pictures. If you were planning on having a remodel, you could place the virtual elements in the real environment and get an experience. But the problem with the AR continues to be occlusion, where your changes come in as a ghosted object and not a solid object. And so the reality doesn't convey as well. So AR is still mostly used in areas like manufacturing and technical support, where you can have somebody looking at something and have somebody else remotely looking at the same thing and walking you through it. Or you can have an automated tutorial while you're working on something, or you can, at the same time you're working on it, you can have the manual or whatever else open virtually next to the object you're working on and continue through that way. Also used on manufacturing line, but AR just hasn't been as successful in the real estate space as VR has been. Now, as we move forward, what VR is going to allow you to do, in fact, we probably should start calling this entire category mixed reality because that's what the industry is doing. But you'll be able to move somewhat seamlessly between the two. If you look at the latest Oculus VR rigs and most of the both cameras and the full internal screen, so you're capturing what's around you. It gets rendered and can be interposed. The way Oculus does it right now is more for just positioning, where if you're trying to move around the room or grab the controllers, you can see through the cameras and grab the controllers. But once you're in the experience, those cameras are then turned off except to warn you about proximity to something you might trip over. For a lot of us that started with VR and VR gaming, we discovered that proximity thing was important because I still have bruises on my legs from discovering the furniture that you can't see in the VR headset that exists in your real world. But VR right now is the most promising, and it's the most promising in terms of being able to render something before you build it. Is most of us that have discovered how not to do home remodels or office remodels have learned it's much better and cheaper to make your changes in virtual reality than to have them done in reality, decide you don't like them, have them ripped out again and redone. You can, as I discovered, by not using VR, you can increase rather dramatically the cost of a remodel as you discover things that are physical objects that have to be changed, as opposed to dealing with them in virtual reality. So it allows you to do a whole bunch of things, and then increasingly allows you to walk into simulation. Let's see how people might interact, how they might work in it, introduce avatars into the environment, and just see how things work. Once again, before you actually lay a single stone or build a foundation, you can do all the preliminary work. So when the building goes up, it goes up pretty clean. You don't have the change orders from the folks that are doing the building, and you can keep your costs down to a minimum. More important, when you're all done, you're much more likely to be happy with the underlying result and not saying, boy, if I just known it was going to look like that, I wouldn't have put that big skylight over the entryway for the site, because it puts the sun right in the receptionist's eyes. But it's too late now. We're just going to have to live with it. If you discover that in virtual reality or in mixed reality, then you've eliminated that before it happens, and you're much happier with the result. So think of it as a new intermediate step between the initial plans for something and the actual finished construction, to assure that you're going to like what results.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Eric. At present, right now in the construction industry, they are facing challenges on team communication because of COVID. From Asia Pacific, I'm just sharing my experience. Do you think this VR and AR actually helpful to improve the team communications?
That I am not sure of, because communications and problems associated to communications come in various aspects, and it's not clear whether AR, VR will have a specific benefit to communicating ideas and concepts that traditional blueprints and specs and other things of that sort. As it is, there is a lot of three-dimensional graphics already being done. The BIMs and stuff like that for construction are already there. And as long as all the different parties involved have understanding of how to use and understanding of the graphics used, there shouldn't be any problems with the communications. But I want to expand a little bit about the AR VR that Rob had mentioned previously. We have actually a common friend, Sheridan Tatsuno, that you know. He has founded a startup that is doing AR VR for construction. And the use of the AR VR is really in planning and visualizing what happens in real life, or what happens in certain exceptional circumstances. So the benefit you can do is to, when you're designing, let's say, an airport, okay, and you want to make sure that your ingress and egress can handle 5,000 people going through in case of an accident or terrorists or something like that. And so, then you're using AI to create the effect of humans moving around, animals and humans or whatever it is that are moving around. You can see whether there are any choke points where problems might arise, where you have one or two people stumble that might cause hundreds of people to get stuck behind them or something like that. And if such situations occur, then you might want to prevent that from happening in the first place by building it properly. And the AR and VR really allows you to visualize how the flow of people moving, and you can also do the flow of air, so if you want to see whether the HVAC is working as you want, you cannot see air moving because it's invisible to our eyes, but you can create, you can generate, digitally, the effect of what the movement of air, and you can, write the program to, define how the movement works and all that. And it has, various Navier-Stokes equation type of things to describe the flow. And then you can see whether the air is flowing properly and, and taking out the exhaust air or whatever it is and bringing in the fresh air and all that. And those are things that you can do with AR, VR that is of great importance. And one of the key places that really is important is when you're doing master planning of neighborhoods or regions. One of the problems that we have, for example, here in San Francisco, is that you build a tall building, some skyscraper, and that causes the wind to go around, and that wind going around might cause vibrations. It might cause loud noises or something of that sort, and you won't know. But AR VR together with AI to model this can give you situations to say, okay, if wind is going at 30 miles an hour or more, then you will get this vibration. So you need some dampening kind of a factor there, and they have to build, whatever it has to do to dampen the effect of wind. Those are the things that you have to do, so that you're not going to get sued up the wazoo, afterwards by people who are going to complain about what's happening and why can I can't close the window to stop the noise, things of that sort. And we actually had that happen here in San Francisco, where we had some condominiums that were near the baseball stadium, and the wind just took off, and it was just causing this incessant noise. And they had to bring back the contractors, come back, and they had to build and add additional things to it, and lawsuits up the everywhere. That I'm sure Dr. Trezavian will add to that kind of a thing. So that's where AR VR helps, is to model and give visualization of what could possibly happen, and to say, okay, if you do it this way, then it won't happen, and then that saves a whole lot of money in the back end.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Hang on a second. The applications in construction are, as you've heard from everyone else, but there are some other really interesting applications, I think, in construction as well, that you have to throw into this arena as you look at the application of AR and VR. One of them is training. Training in the construction industry is always problematic. And it can also be working, particularly with the heavy equipment. Machinery can be dangerous without the training. This is a place where VR as a simulator training, it really enters the picture well and can work there. Another one is when you're doing remote maintenance. I have seen in the oil industry, for example, a lot of AR being used to help people who are on rigs and other things begin to do it. And we're beginning to see that in advanced construction as well. There is some construction not far from me here in Austin, where they are actually using AR in the construction process around some of the advanced robotics that are being installed there. You've heard a lot about design, the visualizations that will go with design, but two of the other very interesting things that we're seeing now is that we're seeing it used to help maintain social distance because of COVID. And that's one of the new applications that is really jumping up and being used there. And the other, which is a very interesting trend for me, is like in many of our industries today, the companies are having problems finding employees. And if you have a company where you're using AR and VR in day-to-day operation for training, for all the other elements like we've talked about, it really ups the ability to recruit new employees into that industry as well. And so those are some of the applications there. The other thing I would like to throw on the table here too is the size of this market. I was kind of surprised when I looked this up before the show. This year, AR VR is a primary driver of a $108 billion combined market, with VR at about 25 billion and augmented reality at about 83 billion. In a recent survey, over 60% of US consumers responded positively that augmented reality would improve how they do their jobs. And the other statistic that kind of surprised me is there are over 3.5 billion people today in the world who use augmented reality, virtual reality weekly. So it's one where there's a lot of growth potential, but one where a lot of progress is being made.
Mhm. Thank you. Mr. Shankar, can you unmute, please? Actually, you are running Indian Global Chamber of Commerce, so I want to know about more the smart city projects inside India and how they're utilizing these AR and VR's technologies.
Exactly. Because AR and VR has changed the game for real estate and infrastructure in a big way. That one is able to visualize, that's one, obviously. At the same time, the quickness, the efficiency, the accuracy of the for the construction industry, this is very precise. And the designs can be done anywhere else in the world as the architects are somewhere else. And it's also holographic. That means that you're able to feel as if like an experiential space, almost emotionally connecting is the power of AR, VR. And another area which is so important is the risk analysis in terms of what could go wrong and what are the points that needs to be considered in terms of things that mostly a flat 2D is not able to really do justice to it. And looking at that, AR VR today is
It's the internet problem.
I'm guessing. Looks
So,
like an internet
yeah,
problem.
yes. Dr. William, you want to add some point from USA?
Oh yes. Actually, I wanted to start by picking up where Dr. Eric began, and that's simply this, and then touch upon some other things that David raised. And first, Dr. Eric raised or mentioned the term BIM, BIM, and what that stands for, just for our audience purposes, because I'm not sure where everybody is. I assume most people understand, but it's building information modeling. And while before we can even get to and wrap our heads around AR and VR, we have to understand building information modeling because it begins with data. And that's big data, metadata, as Rob indicated, because in order to construct these models, either for VR or AR, augmented reality, or even mixed reality, and that is the overlaying of a digital twin onto a real project site, we need to collect the data, and it's been mentioned on prior programs, having the right database for the right project, as David did, I believe, a couple of episodes ago. So BIM, anybody can look it up, Building Information Modeling. Now that's the basic, and that's a data centric. Now that begins to get into the area of how people go about working together, the communication that Dr. Eric mentioned, and how people interact, whether it's the designers, the architects, and ultimately the contractors that are actually building the physical space. Because what we need to do with regard to, well, change kind of the nature of the discussion and the sociological approach, which means both parties or all parties need to understand and become familiar with a data-centric driven model, business information. Then you get to virtual reality, which Rob described as having certain limitations, as well as AR, augmented reality, which has separate limitations. And then the combining of the two, which normally is referred to as reality, mixed reality basis. So I wanted to kind of touch upon that. I do want to say just at this point, because I'm forever optimistic. but we are in a golden age of construction, and these are merely new tools that allow us to ultimately advance. And as a side product, the holy grail out there is something that we've already seen, at least in the movies, through the Iron Man movies, where Tony Stark, the fictional superhero, would build 3D, build and engineer using holograms. Now, we're not quite there yet, but we are pretty close. And with the advent of modular construction, prefab construction, and 3D printed buildings, we are on the cusp. So we're really in a golden age. But I want to take a side step briefly, and that is to deal with this. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily immediately connect climate change with construction with AR, VR. However, all of the savings and the benefits of using AR, VR, or mixed reality, and all of the avoidance of design changes and work orders, in addition to decreasing the costs, allow us to make the building more efficient, as Dr. Eric mentioned. And just to put that in perspective, at least here in the United States, the carbon footprint from construction every year produces about 40% of the carbon footprint that America produces that contributes to climate change. Now, in contrast, to make that concrete, the SUVs that Americans drive around our nation contributes about 8% of the carbon footprint. Now, when we start to look at efficiencies utilizing AR and VR and mixed reality, and mixed reality is really just taking a digital twin that you create based on the data and overlaying that into the physical area. That allows all of those efficiencies in production, savings in cost, but it also allows, as Dr. Eric, allows us to measure airflow, energy usage, and as Rob mentioned, the correct placement of either skylights or other things to make it all efficient. And in some models, depending on the sophistication of the software, it allows designers, architects to predict the energy usage of a particular building. And all of that is incredibly efficient and has the byproduct of reducing our carbon footprint. Now, I just want to hit on, and I want to throw it on the table, as Dave would say, the safety portion and the training is remarkable, because and fundamentally it's no different in terms of relating to our audience, no different than what pilots use when they go into a simulator when they're trying to learn how to operate a new airplane. And so it's not just how you operate the airplane, it's also what do you do in terms of emergencies? And it's also how you navigate it operationally. But the issue there is simply this, that with regard to worker training and safety, it's engaging and it empowers the workforce, which contributes to the acceptance of a data-centric model and should contribute to the increased communication so that it becomes a seamless kind of process from design, architecture, environmental impact to build. And that is remarkable. There is one other thing, David, I just want to kind of, if you don't mind me cribbing your words, I want to throw on the table. And that is this notion of cybersecurity in the construction industry. Because when you get to these large things, because you're collecting a great deal of data, it's fundamentally going to be data centric. You do have to at least cast an eye towards securing the information and such that you collect. And this is important because we have two examples of this in the past when that's really opened up our eyes. In 2010, there was a Stuxnet attack on the nuclear plants in Iran, and that was 11 years ago. But more recently, there was the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline, and what that did was that raised the specter or raised the red flag, one of cybersecurity, but two, understanding that the BIM model and this new approach to construction generates a great deal of data. Normally we think of as IT, information technology, but then there's also the operational side. That is, after the build, when you hand it over to the owners who paid for the building, how are they operating and how are they going to deal with the maintenance, spotting it in advance or assessing the risk of an outside attack. And that's generally referred to as OT, or operational technology. And we're beginning to see the convergence of IT and OT given data centric and the usage of VR, AR, and mixed reality. But I just want to throw the notion out there of security in the construction build.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dan.
Let me unmute there. Okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I like the way we're approaching this topic, but I think we could approach it even in a deeper sense, and that's we are beings on a planet. Some would say it's spaceship Earth, but are we treating spaceship Earth like the spaceship that it is? So we have access to a huge data set of location-based, evidence-based information now, and we're finding out more about how the natural world around us operates. We know that trees are actually talking to each other through their root systems. We have design sciences like permaculture, which I'm a big fan of. It's kind of a portmanteau of permanent agriculture. And what part of permaculture design does is it divides your surrounding area into zones. The zones that you are most likely to go in and out of are numbered with lower numbers, and the zones that are farther away from where you travel have higher numbers. And there's a design that proceeds accordingly on this theory. So the things that you want to access most often are going to be put in the zone 1, and so on. So that's one thing. And usually when permaculture installations are designed, they're usually for rather small plots, a household lot. But now people are actually looking at citywide permaculture designs, where you take into account things like the natural air flows and water flows and nature, migration flows. I know truck drivers have noticed that they don't have to clean their windshields as much because the bugs are dying off. We are in a mass extinction. You can see like we've lost 80% of like the insect life in some areas. And humans have always had this kind of ad hoc extractive relationship to nature, where we just kind of, oh, well, we're here, we want stuff, let's go get it, yay for us. that age is kind of coming to an end. We are actually, some people have called this the Anthropocene age. The earlier ages had names like Holocene and Miocene, but we have actually crafted our own unique geologic age because we are having that big an impact on the world around us. So before we get too centered on buildings and treating nature like furniture to move around for our pleasure, let's step back and take like a more holistic systems level design approach. I was on the call last night. We had a meeting with the local makerspace here in Conejo Valley. I mentioned about this. I was going to be on this this panel, and they said, "Oh, you know what? People are actually designing houses with little entryways for robots to come in and out of the house." So there's kind of a little bit of a novel, like you have a cat door, for your cat or your pet to go in and out of the house. Even like the dumb waiters that were used, that was kind of an early robotic augmentation of designing for the future. So yeah, let's not design for the past. Let's design for the future, and augmented reality and VR, digital twinning, a great simulation technology that NASA invented. Go NASA! is where we should all be putting our design strengths on that, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think Mr. Shankar, in the middle of the point, there is an internet problem, so you can share your views from India, especially what's going on, the smart city projects in India.
Right. So I just wanted to add to on the same lines that there are so many variables that a design concept cannot be captured in a still photograph or graphics. So there are weather changes, Or let us say, in the midst of an idea, a new innovation comes in. There is a water project, there is a lake, and they're doing something with that. And at the same time, they want to put solar panels on top and see how that can be created into energy. And then they want to add the water into hydroelectric project. So in stages, when you want to design, the AR VR is very helpful. And if you want to see the climatic changes and what happens over a period of time, then again, you can see the same project vis-a-vis the change according to what happens in a year's time. That helps us predict, design accordingly, and introduce new innovations into that to make it even more objective. So in a smart city project, it is a stages by stages project. So there's an initial part. Then there are layers in that. The layers as in how people live and surround themselves, the social infrastructure. That is different from the smart city, smart factory. So they use AR, VR just to see the interaction between the two, between people staying there and the actual situation of smart factories, how it interacts. So AR, VR is basically used to study the layers from various angles, from an economic point, from an electrification point, how it would be, from the water systems, and from a dynamics of traffic moving. So it gets pretty complex when it looks at just from an architectural point, from an actually living space point. And that's where AR and VR are being used like an experiential thing, intelligent for the decisions to be made based on how it is responding to it. So it's a kind of an interactive thing. And when you add AI to that, and you'll understand how intelligent the whole AR VR becomes. You can actually see it in real time. You put those, what do you call them? And then you see you're in it, and you can experience it. Based on that, you change your approach, you change your design thinking. So it's a very, very fluid aspect of AR, VR that I would say that smart cities are using. And multiple engagements or multiple architects can come in and fold together, which is not the case otherwise. So there are many uses to AR, VR. Accordingly, in the area of traffic, in the area of building cities, what all goes through that. All of that integration requires very complex AR systems. Yes.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Bivas. Mr. Bivas, can you hear me? It's great, like if our speakers open their camera.
Sure.
Yes, yeah, because everybody open their camera. Sometimes it's bad for our audience. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. So I think it's good. What I was thinking in terms of affordability point of view, the AR and VR. This technology, I think, I was, a couple of startup pitched me 7, 8 years back, and I was thinking that, it could be more useful if it comes to the affordability for a common man. And hence I was watching this space very closely. And what I realize is that, of course, the technology has a lot of advantages. But in terms of, when you look at the real estate market or construction market or infra market and the complete supply chain, I have been, visiting couple of building construction material factories, where, this technology can be greatly used. But, either the adaptability or the mindset issues which is coming in. And, it is not, basically the wearing the headsets or the smart glasses and those kind of things is kind of, stopping them to use it, in a more day-to-day work. And it remains more in the labs basically, and not coming in at a factory level or at the, the consumer level basically. So, the whole thing is like, of course, we are talking about smart cities and, the design smart cities, but at the same time, the existing cities, facing tough challenges in terms of these floods coming in so often, drainage systems are not good. Okay, so there are technologies where how can you change your existing infrastructure, the city infrastructure, and predict, and if you can combine this AR VR technology with the artificial intelligence or with the sensor based technologies or IoTs, it can give the much more effective usage, where you can give the command, because you can see the master plan in front of your eyes, and then you can give the command and the things are getting executed through the IoTs or the sensor technologies. Okay, so the applications and the technologies need to submerge and integrate with each other to have a much more better kind of applications and usage, which is reaching to the common man use. So that's the point which I want to make it. The other thing is that somebody was mentioning this Iron Man and Tony Tony Stark. So something we want to see as reality. Everybody want to see this as reality, where all these next gen technologies. If we can bring it to the dining room or maybe kitchen or maybe at drawing rooms, then it would be more effective and will not remain only at the simulation level, at the factory levels, or at the level for master planning, basically. So it has a much greater usage than the 360-degree design. But I would say that from the design to the end application, we need to think through for better usage of the AR and VR. And I think the platforms needs to be created where right now what is happening, these forums and the communities of AI, talking with more of a AI related AI and the sectors. But I want to say that why can't AI and AR VR and the IoT technologies or many other technologies coming together and creating the solutions which is more user friendly, more futuristic, and more practical in nature, in terms of whether be it any age group, they would be more comfortable and not wearing those heavy head glass and headphones, basically. So from that perspective, I think the smartphone industry needs to work a lot to work on these technologies to bring it on the smartphone. And those kind of innovations or R&D is required. That is what my I'm not sure about what is the great advancements going on the these technologies. AR and VR especially, to the tablets and the smartphones, it is coming up. But the common use is still far away. And second part is that this AR and VR is not only in terms of the real estate or infra space, but the whole ecosystem, because ultimately what we are talking is creating the smart infrastructure, smart cities. But it is not only about creating the external infrastructure through AR, VR, smart design, 360-degree smart design. Because when we see the nature's creation, the God's creation is beyond AR, VR. Something, if we can correlate the nature's creation with the our common day-to-day life, then it has to come to the our drawing rooms and bedrooms, these technologies. And that's the innovation can be done by blending these other technologies and make it more simpler, cost effective, affordable, and easy to use for the common man. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Talib, can you hear me? Professor Talib, can you hear me? I'm sorry, he's trying to join with us. Again, internet problem. So I think, Professor Rob, you can take the strategy how we can help him. Professor Talib, can you hear me?
Is he back? No, there he is.
Professor Talib, can you hear me? Okay. In that situation, Mr. Adam.
I can't hear you. I can't.
Oh,
Me
Mr.
too.
Adam, I think.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
no problem. Thank you. So we know how many different apps and how many different kinds of apps we can get on our smartphones these days. We have apps for weather and weather forecasting. We have maps to help us with directions and for sightseeing and recreation. We have language apps for helping us read and pronounce signs and names, boards and to help translations as well. Apps for restaurants where we can check if restaurants have, on average, favorable reviews or unfavorable reviews, as well as to check whether they can cater for diners with particular allergies or dietary requirements or not. And we could keep going, really. Apps to scan QR codes, bus and train timetables. So a useful direction to go in, as far as VR and AR are concerned, would be to migrate from smartphones to specially fitted glasses or high-tech contact lenses that projects onto our retinas, where these devices would use AR capabilities to overlay the environment seen with multiple graphics, where you can see displays from these apps simultaneously. Save time and effort going from app to app to app on a smartphone with a touchscreen interface. So, for example, let's say I'm in Greece on holiday on an island. I have these eyeglasses where I can see graphics from one app, where I can see representations of the weather, as well as forecasting graphics, arrows and directions pointing me to where the nearest restaurant that does gluten-free dishes is in relation to my current position, a window with reviews of the hotel I'm staying at, and I can hear translations from Greek to English of an advertisement for boat trips in my earphones. And furthermore, I could wear like some kind of eye ring where around my finger, so the device knows where I'm pointing to in the AR space. So I can lift my arm up, reach out in front, and point and select another advert to my left for ice cream, click, and a voice reads in translated Greek to English. Or if not a ring, maybe an eye glove device. So the utility of such a device setup are quite clear for not just real estate, but multiple areas. I remember back in the days of Windows 98 where we had multimedia encyclopedias on disks and some images had 360-degree visibility where you could rotate and look around. I think it was Encarta was one of them. But yes, AR would save lots of journeys from location to location to location, using fuel to make these trips, and in a matter of hours, do some reconnaissance for about 20 properties in immersive AR, VR environments in a matter of hours, when before it would have taken much longer, a week perhaps, to see 20 or so properties, one after the other, burning fuel to drive there and back again and so on. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Professor Talib, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Yes. Professor, you are Secretary General for World Tourism Organization. So different kind of projects and constructions and happening, I think, under your leaderships. So how actually VR and AR will be helpful for this real estate and construction industry?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In cities are bound to grow, definitely, because the population of mankind is growing in cities. Cities today are more than 50% of the population of the world live in cities, and it's likely to grow. So we have to adjust to the fact that growing cities have to adjust themselves to the needs of mankind. So we can't just depend on the fact that cities are going to be frozen at all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You're pretty quiet, though. If you could speak a little louder, it'd be better.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Professor. Professor Rob, actually, like we utilize different technology for minimize the cost. Actually, how VR and AR can minimize the cost in the construction industry, and how it will be helpful for what actually Mr. Shankar decide this smart city projects. So, what is the future?
Sure. First, I'm going to answer the question you asked Dr. Eric earlier with regard to communications. AR is actually being used pretty aggressively for communications to put somebody that's off-site, on-site virtually. You can use a set of AR glasses which contain cameras to put the person at the site that you're viewing, so they can see effectively through your eyes. It's good for collaboration for remote folks. Like, for instance, if all of us wanted to look at a particular site that was remote from all but one of us, that one person that's there could put on the AR glasses and effectively walk us through the site without having to hold a camera, and whatever they're seeing, we're seeing, so we don't need them to constantly point out the different elements. We have the same view they do, and can cut back on time. Also, if you want to highlight a particular element or a design concept, you can do so relatively easily, and without having to take a picture, convey the picture back, or something along those lines that slows down the process. So you can put somebody at that remote location, and that saves them having to travel to it. And it's a great way to bring in experts that might be out of country relatively rapidly without putting them on a plane. Now, as far as cutting costs, the big cost advantage is the ability to do most of your design and creation work in the virtual world, as opposed to doing it physically, which is far cheaper. So your mistakes are made in the relatively inexpensive environment as opposed to the expensive environment. And you can trial different things. There's no cost for other than the labor of setting up the virtual environment and moving the elements. There's relatively, I shouldn't say no cost, there's relatively little cost in terms of experimenting with stuff. So for instance, for a lot of folks, if they're building a home or building a building, they may not think about access for disabled people, which is an ADA requirement here in the United States, and may place the stuff improperly. There are all kinds of pictures on the web of ramps that are too steep, or ramps that were thought of after the fact and they don't fundamentally work. You can trial all of that out in virtual reality. And if you're looking at building a home, a lot of us build homes that are multi-story, but we don't think about the fact that as we get into our 80s and 90s, we may need to go up and down those stairs that we're building in with wheelchairs, and that's not practical. And so you can build your home so it's sustainable across your future as you age, so you can more easily get around the house and think through that. And I know it was mentioned that some homes are now being designed with robotic entry. I think Dan mentioned that, but really starting to plan for the future. One of the things that's really kind of surprised me, though, now that we're in this kind of global warming, climate change environment, that we're not more aggressively looking at concepts like ecologies, which contain the stores, the living, and the working environment all in a single structure that can be protected from major weather events. Here in the United States, of course, we're recovering from Hurricane Ida, and a lot of the homes that were built to handle a Category 4 and 5 hurricane failed catastrophically during this hurricane, which was kind of surprising because a lot of these houses had been rebuilt after Katrina and built to stand another hurricane like Katrina, and yet Hurricane Ida took them right out. So with virtual reality and digital twins, you can test the building materials and the concepts that you're using against a virtual wind and see if it would actually hold up. I'm absolutely convinced that we should stop using wood as our predominant building material, because a while back we started to re-engineer wood to get it to grow faster, but we made it far weaker when we did that. And so a lot of wood structures that should be able to take these shear forces are not at the moment. And there are little things that you can do even with wood that makes them hold up. For instance, there are nails that are specifically designed for high wind so they don't back out, that you can use. They're moderately more expensive than regular nails, but they're not being used. And a lot of the structural failures are due to the stress putting on the house, and then the nails back out. Then you get a wall failure, the house gets overpressurized, and then it explodes like a bomb went off in it, and nothing's set. Other things are window failures can cause the same thing. You got a major window failure, the house overpressurizes, and it blows up from the inside. And those are things that you can emulate in the virtual world and then correct when you actually build the home so that it will hold up under the weather. Same thing with regard to large construction. Certain roofing types do not hold up well in high wind. We watched a hospital's roof get ripped off under Ida, and it looks like they used a composite roof of some kind, and that particular style of roof does not take high wind very well, and it will decouple and rip off. So what it can do is it can allow you to explore different design elements. It can allow you to test against different weather conditions that you might experience, be that flood or high wind or whatever, and allow you to anticipate future changes, be that personal robotics. Though if you saw that Elon Musk personal robot, that's pretty much human-sized, not going to fit through a dog door, but allows you to anticipate that, or ADA kinds of things, making sure that you've got you can get wheelchairs up and down the stairs, and that you are fully accessible. So it can really help. It looks like Dr. William had a question.
Oh, well, actually, for lack of a better term, and
Speak up. I can barely hear you.
Okay, I said for lack of a better term, and just to throw in a pun, I just wanted to augment something that you answered, and then I want to go to Dave before Sharif comes back. And that's simply this: that there are 4 basic areas where virtual VR, AR can save money, and that's in obviously the design and issue resolution, Rob, which you talked about, because it's a lot cheaper for all the reasons you mentioned. It's also in the modification and manipulation, which you also highlighted, because it's a lot cheaper for those areas. But it's also, as Dave mentioned, it's in the safety, planning, and site logistics. Because one of the largest residual costs of construction are the injuries to workers. And so to the extent that you can train them in advance and plan the site logistics in advance, then you are ameliorating the costs at a later point in time. And then finally, and this is we call it just-in-time delivery in retail, but it's schedule optimization, because when and you planned everything out, utilizing all of these and all the modifications, and it's all said and done, a couple of things occur. You know exactly what materials you need and when you need them, and so you can have just-in-time deliveries for the construction materials. And then there is progress monitoring, because it's just as, and it's the same concept, and at the forefront with the design, issue resolution, modifications. You can monitor the progress of the project in real time through the project, utilizing AR, VR, and spot any problems that you may have missed before, because they're all fallible. And then one other item that one of our colleagues raised, and that is this, that you can have multiple people working at the site at the same time through VR. You can have 2 or 3 people working on engineers. You can have a whole team come in, and that increases the communication and the collaboration, so that we can figure out fundamentally where the pipes go, where the lights go, where the windows go, where the doors go. Dr. Sharif, I was augmenting Rob.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Eric. Yes, we are discussing that how we can minimize the cost of this. Actually, VR and AR can minimize the cost of this construction industry if you give us some strategic guidelines. And
I think everyone else have already is pretty much clarified. It's pretty clear how AR, VR can do it, because what you're doing is you're modeling the final product, and you can model it for cheap. Okay. It's just that previous ways of modeling were actually real physical models, right? You make something 1/10 the scale, and it's actually built, and that takes some artistic skill to, carve and form and all that. You put things together to show what you have in mind. That takes time, and it takes effort, and actually, you have physical pieces of balsa wood or whatever you use to make that model, and those things are not trivial, and the skill to do that takes is both an artistic and a carpenter type skill, and as well as being able to take what you're visualizing in your head, or what the group is visualizing in their collective head, and then making it into a scale model of it. Here with AR, VR, it's just, a couple of keystrokes, and then bam, things are put into place. to some degree, what is lacking in some cases is maybe some of the finer details of some of the artistic or the more esoteric designs. As you can see in a lot of the more modern buildings, at least here in San Francisco, again, we have unfortunately. I'll wait until someone can turn it off. Here in San Francisco, unfortunately, we have a plethora of new modern designs that are just completely devoid of any aesthetics. Okay, they're, the most they do for aesthetics is maybe slap some green and some pink and brown and slap them together in some weird way, and that's about it. But the surface of the walls, of the exterior walls, the roof, the windows, and the way you put it around that, there's nothing there that makes it look worthwhile. And there is a lack of the lack of aesthetics does make it not as appealing. And that is sort of what you get when you kind of like take modular kind of things and kind of slap them together. But that's also at the same time, that's also an argument that the designers, the architects have to put more effort into making things more appealing aesthetically beyond just the construction of it and the pricing and all these other stuff. Because, AR and VR doesn't preclude having better aesthetics. It's just that if you don't add that feature to it and you don't use that feature, then you're not going to get it. So that's why we have boring buildings here in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor David Smith, you are discussing about the market of AR and VR. I'm more interested to know that how the new generations, like many young people, they can develop their careers in AR and VR industries, and what type of opportunities they have.
Well, I believe there's tremendous opportunities there. And even as you begin to look at it in the government side of this, there is a large manufacturing facility being constructed down the road from me to build batteries and electric truck vehicles. And what's interesting there is they are using augmented reality to speed up the inspection process, where some of the government inspectors are wearing the heads and going with them remotely through the facility as they're building it to sign checklists off on the approval process. And I see that as a very interesting one, because this is a huge facility and the construction's 24 hours a day. So it really helps you begin to get in that side. But on the education side, as in so many cases, you need to understand mathematics behind this if you're going to be involved on the development side. Modeling, particularly 3D modeling, is a big help as you're working through this. On the digital side of it, it's very interesting because it's a fusion of multiple different industry segments together to make AR and VR work. So someone who can work at the level cross-disciplinary in the digital domains would have a real advantage as you're beginning to look at how to prepare yourself for this, because it really is that fusion of technologies and approaches that have made this possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Talib, can you hear me? Professor Talib, can you hear me? Okay. Mr. Shankar.
Yeah.
Yes, we are discussing on the opportunity for this youth community in AR and VR industries. And I know that India has many startups in AR and VR industries. So what is their performance and how they actually survive right now in India, and what is the business condition?
Sure, the incorporating startups is definitely a partnership that we have with industrial groups. And there are quite a few AR/VR startups that we are engaging ourselves in with. the power of AI at the back of it, because it's an interesting combination, as Bhavesh just spoke about, that we can't do it on an individual basis. These technologies are interconnected. And it's interesting to see how they're getting connected between the IoT, the AR, VR, the AI, and the smartphones. And just today, I was on a call with some of the people who are talking about AR, VR, and how it can integrate ourselves into these smart cities. And I don't know the names of these technologies that are coming, and pretty interesting, but completely experiential in terms of real time. They're using it to, like I said, to understand the weather conditions, include biodiversity, to make sure that everything coexists in time, form, and distance. So this is where it is going, and it's not. It's no more about just infrastructure. You can't really look at infrastructure. You have to look at the natural habitat and how certain industries are changing. You know, for example, we have one coming up here, which is a smart factory. But the smart factory has got all the 17 SDGs integrated in that. And the person who was doing the AR VR was suggesting that we need to integrate all of those informations, the data integrated, to turn itself into something like a robotic advantage. So, which is not even which is not even understood from a just one point of view. We have the point is to integrate all these technologies together.
Thank you, Mr. Bhavesh. Yes, can you hear me? Please unmute, please.
It's already unmuted.
Okay. Basically, I want to know more about the some innovation from India, especially different kind of AR and VR developments, and what is their performance right now inside India. Maybe they are performing well.
See, in terms of innovations, basically, people are, those who are innovators or the 360 design thinkers, who are working very closely with real estate or construction industries. They are not very well versed with the technology world, IT or the AR, VR technologies. So, there is a technology where, the no coding basis, if these designers can learn the AR and VR in their, universities, and when they come out, they are actually creators and they can see the end to end in totality. But since they don't have the tech knowledge, they are not able to convert their entire visualization into the product. So the innovation, what is happening is that how can we give the kind of a design libraries of drag and drop in the AR platform on a no coding basis. So that let's say if somebody's, was mentioning that, something is happening in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai or in Singapore, there are lots of better versions can come out because the visual power of the architects or the interior designers or those people who are into the CAD designers of factories, they have the design ability, but when it comes to using the tech of AR and VR, they are a little afraid of. So the innovation which is happening right now in some of the space where how this problem of no coding basis AR and VR with the complete stack of design library, and it's just a drag and drop with your own visualization. You can create the smart factories, the smart cities, or the smart habitat. So that's one part of innovation. Second part of innovation is happening where the blending of these technologies, where these AR and VR no longer remain as an isolated technologies. The one is to bring down the cost what is to be required to do in the smartphones, number one. Number two, that what is to be required in for the experiential, whatever the glasses or the gadget which we need to use it. Without that, how can we use that thing, and some of the spectacles are coming up. So in your spectacles, you have your own AR VR world basically. So those technologies are also coming up. The third one is that the application based blending of AR VR with IoT is the most common technologies which is coming up. Of course, it is AI is there everywhere, but more of a something like the again I'm quoting the Iron Man Tony Stark. So that is the something where in the smart offices, smart factories, and smart homes, need to be controlled through the command centers. And this all these high-end technologies need to submerge and integrated, where the experience is something of different class, where it will not be limited to the particular applications, but it can come to the common man applications. Somebody shared with me something like a smart kitchen, and he was with the robotic, where you have the your recipes and menu available, and you just put it, and in 5 minutes your robo is giving you the best of the recipes. And now this is like a common problem of the person who is cooking and giving you the recipes. But in terms of if those technologies, I mean, now it was costing about $500,000 to $1 million, the smart kitchen. Now, just imagine that if it needs to reach out to the common man, okay, the technology cost has to be reduced a lot. So it looks quite fancy when we use AI, AR, VR, or IoT. But there is a phobia, and there's a phobia. There is one another thing is there is a skepticism that the high-end technology is very costly, and it is only meant for the billionaires, and it is not meant for the common man usage. So the idea of the innovation is basically how to reduce the cost, so by blending these technologies, and most effective common use, if we can innovate through this way, then I think it has a greater applications, and it can serve the humanity, as well as maybe larger way 17 SDGs cause can be also served.
Thank you, Mr. Homestoner. You are from construction industry. You have business. So, what's going on inside construction industry in USA, and especially how VR and AR can be helpful for construction industries and the real estate industry? Can you unmute, please, Mr. Homestoner?
Well, the trend now is to become eco-friendly and to replace outdated building materials with new building materials that are more environmentally friendly. So what we're basically doing, because I'm in the steel frame construction business, so we make modular steel framed housing and structural buildings, because steel is more readily available, it's cheaper than wood, and it has no problems in comparison to wood construction. Plus, it eradicates a lot of the deforestation that's going on and creating problems with the environment. So the fact of the matter is, in my particular part of the world, in my particular space, is developing and finding and sourcing eco-friendly building materials and integrating them into our development in our different real estate development projects.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. You are transhumanist, so
I'm always into the transhumanist candidate take on things.
Yes.
One of my heroes is Buckminster Fuller, and one of his specialties was anticipatory design science. we need to be comprehensive, whole systems kinds of thinkers when we do things, because we have limited resources. But technology does have the opportunity for us to live without taking advantage of everyone else. Everyone can live without being at the expense of everyone else. I think if we collaborate and cooperate using the new digital technologies, this is entirely doable. And it's just a matter of the connectivity and the collaboration tools that we use. We have a pandemic going on right now. It's an airborne pathogen-based thing, and for some reason, there's a lot of anti-science thinking, like oh, I have the right to spread my airborne pathogens freely. So this is a problem. But I think urban designers and planners and people that create habitats and use real estate are going to need to take this into account, because apparently things like this will become endemic. Just like we haven't cured the common cold. We're going to have to have better air handling and distancing measures, or ways to check people's health as they enter and leave human spaces. So that's going to be in play very much, and planners would be well served to take that into account. The resources of nature oftentimes were unfairly seized and monopolized in the past, and this is slowly being undone, I believe, through different initiatives like geoism, where we consider the resources of nature more of a commons that need to be rented at market, fairly market-based mechanisms. And then actually, Tom Paine, one of the founders of America, wrote a book called Agrarian Justice, where he incorporated the idea of a universal basic income derived from land rent. And I think this is not well known yet, but it's going to become increasingly well known. It's kind of like truth and reconciliation, or transitional justice. So it's people need to keep what they make, but pay for what they take. It's a very simple idea. Then I'm sure the entrenched interests are not entirely happy with it, but hey, we have governments to keep the entrenched interests on their toes. I mean, no matter what you do in government, you're either going to piss off an entrenched interest or someone who wants to be an entrenched interest. So that's why we need civilian engagement, and kind of went all over the map there. But speaking of mapping technology is incredibly well digitized nowadays, and that's going to play a huge role. So I'll leave my statement there. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, you are another transhumanist member. So what do you think? We can reduce the price of VR and AR technology?
Yeah, you're right, Sharif. I am quite a transhumanism enthusiast, and I had some thoughts along the lines of how we could merge these topics together. So firstly, I was enjoying some of what Dr. Eric was saying about ugly buildings and beauty and aesthetics and ugly buildings, as well as what Mr. Bhavesh said about CAD and such. And I remember we touched upon this before. I think it was during one of the episodes about 3D printing, where we were talking about beauty and aesthetics. And I'm hopeful that emerging tech will help us facilitate a return to beauty and neo-renaissance and new enlightenment. We know that beauty and ugliness have an effect on people, and among other things, we should leave as much ugliness as we can behind as in history, if we can help it. I remember being friends with, I remember being with some friends, and we were walking around a museum of marble sculptures. We're in a part of the city where there was lots of neoclassical architecture, and it's quite mystifying how easily traditions of beauty are abandoned, and the skills needed to make them, sculpt them, have in many cases been lost, unfortunately. So maybe we could use virtual reality and or fully immersive interfaces to simulate, replicate these beautiful forms as a form of inspiration, as well as a modeling of what can be built, what is possible to do, what is far more complicated and tricky to accomplish. Although what is too easy isn't as worth as doing something challenging, of course. And for lost skills, masonry, sculpting, we could use 3D printing. We could introduce the idea of a more widespread utilization of tech like 3D printing in architecture, as well as what I can describe as portable CAD system of some kind that can sculpt materials, and we can use these in conjunction with each other. So something like using lasers or robotic sculpting prostheses that someone could wear on the hand, or a kind of automated robotic system sculpting something modeled remotely on a computer over there somewhere. So a return to beauty is a good enough reason to innovate for the technology to help us achieve it, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is excellent discussions. We learn a lot about AR and VR industry and inside story of construction industry. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor Rob. What's your concluding remarks today?
Well, we're still at the very beginning of AR VR. I mean, the end goal is to be able to enter a metaverse type of environment and have it be indistinguishable from the real world. We're not there yet. We're getting there rather impressively, aggressively, if I can use those words together. But the creation of the metaverse is now accelerated. You might even remember a property called Second Life that was probably an early precursor to this. It's back and gaining steam again. As we go through this, the metaverse and the ability to use mixed reality is going to change how we interact with things. It's going to change how we perceive the world. It's going to change where we live and how we live. It's going to allow us to better live where we want to and work for people that may be across the globe. The pandemic has sped that particular effort up by about a decade at the moment. It's changing. You mentioned price reductions. Facebook has driven down the incredibly capable Av1 below $500, and you might remember the initial VR headsets are closer to $1,500 and not very good. So the new Oculus is better than those more expensive rigs and far cheaper, and prices will continue to come down as we reach value. The areas now that we have to advance in are better controls, better human-machine interfaces. So we're more natural. We're still using joystick derivatives for the most part to interact, and that's not the way we interact with the world. You don't pick up a tool with a joystick control. You pick up a tool with your hand and fix that. Other overlays that impact this are things like conversational AI, where you can interact with the artificial intelligence or the machine by your voice and not need a keyboard or mouse, which again is more natural. That's how we interact with each other. It's how we are interacting here. And being able to adopt those same methodologies in a virtual world will change also rather dramatically how we work with people and machines. The NPCs, the machine-generated characters that exist in these virtual environments will be increasingly seemingly real as they are backed up by ever smarter and more capable artificial intelligences. Then at some future point, many of us will have a mixed reality pets, have mixed reality friends, and have mixed reality coaches and teachers that will drive through this environment to help us advance, hopefully better than existing systems. I mean, the one thing we didn't talk about is really how AR and VR can change the educational experience, and coupled with AI, it could change it dramatically. We've had a huge problem, particularly with younger kids during the pandemic, being unable to interact with other kids, and this could fix that without putting them at risk. The idea of taking a bunch of kids and putting them together because before you can vaccinate them, to me, was incredibly risky, but against the thought that they're not getting the critical interaction that they need, you're trading off you're increasing a short-term risk for trying to solve a long-term problem, and the inability to interact creates kids that may not have their personalities properly formed. So being able to use these technologies to create better people, to be able to do things smarter and more intelligently, that's all in the promise of mixed reality, and it's all coming. I think I'm one of the folks that wishes it would just get here a lot sooner.
Thank you. Dr. William.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I guess I just want to begin with this part for the conclusion. And it's a simple question. What if? Because with AR, VR, mixed reality, we get to answer that question in a more cost-efficient way within the construction industry. What if I change this feature or that feature? What if I do a training program this way rather than that way without the exorbitant costs that the old ways produced? What does it mean to change components of a building and its impact on climate change. And to the extent that AR, VR, mixed reality allows us to answer those questions at a very, very early stage, as well as continuously through the process within the construction industry, that it seems to me is the promise at hand. I'm mindful of Rob's point. It's a fundamental point, and it touches upon what Dave said earlier about training and education for workers and the work site. But fundamentally, I'd like to at least conclude with simply this: we are on the precipice when we can ask ourselves, at least within the construction industry, what if? What if I use a different material? What if I adjust where the site plan? Uh, what kinds of impacts will that have without having to then come back and have changing work orders, cost overruns, and everything else? And so it really is an exciting time. And I always like to crib off the people that are more intelligent than me. So Rob, I like you can't wait until it gets here faster.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks today?
Right. I almost reached over in one of my desk over here and pulled out my goggles to put on so that I could be in character as part of this show today. But, sometimes they're just too heavy. I think, as has been said by Rob, has been said by William, there's a great future here. It still has a ways to go. I am particularly, and see, Rob went back and beat me to it. I almost did the same. I have the same one, Rob. I almost want to, though, see when this type of technology becomes integrated with other sensors. When I've worn my goggles and stuff like that, like Rob had mentioned earlier, I bump into stuff. At one of the trade shows a number of years ago where they were displaying this one, I slapped somebody next to me as part of using it, and I'm sure they were surprised. And see, Rob and I both had the same advantage on part of this is we get these sent to us at times, and it's fun playing with the different ones and giving away the ones I don't like. But these are some of the futures of it, though, and it's something that's going to be, at least for the next decade or so, more common in it. The next phase after this really is to see holographic technology come into place. And with the holographic technology, it will change how we interact in a VR, AR type environment as well. So the future is there. The future is going to continue to advance. I am ready for the holodeck on the Starship that we can use as part of this, and it cannot get here too fast for me.
Thank you. Mr. Bhavesh, what's your concluding remarks, please?
So, in terms of, giving more boosters to the creative thinkers, I think when we compare nature's design or a God's design with the man-made design, okay, the man-made designs are not, long lasted for, let's say, a couple of thousand years, whereas nature's design is so well proven. And then to align with this kind of giving the booster power to the designers, I think the blending of the high-end technologies under one roof is required as a one platform. And it can come as a no coding and coding both. So those who are not well versed with the coding, they can create such good platforms with the design libraries in terms of drag and drop of a couple of features and functions. That is one part. Second part is that there are lots of hardware issues in this particular thing. So how can we solve these hardware issues, which is like a headset or a bulky piece like Rob was wearing. So, how can we get rid of this bulky piece in terms of removing the hardwares from bulkiness to the slim hardware? And how can we make it from expensive to little more affordable for the masses? That is the another thing. It's the third thing is we have very limited content available when we approach the AR and VR in terms of the overall content to be increased. The regulations is also not very clear in some of the countries in terms of the mass usage of AR and VR. So a little bit specific policies on AR and VR for the mass usage can be worked upon at a policy level to remove the skepticism from the public in terms of it is too expensive, or sometime it generates the safety risk, but rather it can be used to remove the safety risk. So all of this need to work upon in terms of making it more user friendly, the affordability part, and the making the more life enjoyable. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dan.
Yeah, we're in an amazing era of connectivity, like we spoke about yesterday on the show. It was a good conversation, and I think one of the watchwords of connectivity is standardization. Things don't really take off until you have industry-wide standards. So the whole universe of digital twinning, as you might call the AR, VR, AI world, is going to need standards. And I just typed in the chat. There's a outfit called the Digital Twin Consortium, and I think they might be a good place to hook up with to stay in the standardized subset of this developing universe. We want to make sure that we address digital divide issues, as we advance. These shouldn't be all first world problems. They should be developing world shared development issues. And we are a human family on a fragile spaceship, and we need to start thinking like that and acting like that. So I'm glad we're having conversations about that. And go ham radio, go transhumanism.
Thank you, Mr. Holmister. Thank you, Mr. Holmister.
Taking in consideration of the other gentlemen and what their responses were, and in our particular situation, we've got to look at this in practicality and the fact that we develop environments, living communities for seniors, for veterans, for different specified groups that want to kind of huddle up and face the sustainability issue in the 21st century as a group more so than as an individual. And part of that is, a lot of that is based on all these technologies, including VR and holograms and the like. And I live here in Los Angeles, and I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs that are constantly upgrading and developing these kinds of technologies. So in our practicality model, we try to layer it in so it's not too dramatic for the average person to adjust to it. But we're finding that it's going to be indispensable in tomorrow's development of shelter and communities, is to, if you will, blend it in slowly so people can get used to using it. And just like any other technologies, including our appliances and whatnot, and getting our automobiles to talk to our house, to talk to our phone, and this communication triad will continue to grow and become stronger. But I can't agree with everyone here more in the fact that as we develop these communities around the world, these technologies are going to be integrated into these developments. And the more that we can educate the public and get them to use it, the more it'll flourish.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. Unmute, please.
I was just thinking that the one thing that we did not touch upon is marketing and investment-related aspects of AR/VR. That is, when you look at a smart city or infrastructure, it is much more exciting for an AR/VR presentation for investors around the world that they can experience and walk through and all the five senses, not five senses, but 3 or 4 senses all in place. It makes much more sense because in investments in infrastructure is basically a visual experience. And you will always find that people use visuals and brochures and videos to present it. And now we got AR/VR. And even if you look at from a point of purchase of projects, like this, the Flash Dubai projects, I can almost see that families or offices from around the world can actually come in a space and look at it, feel it, walk through it, and then decide maybe we should remove the swimming pool from this side to that side. Immediately you can have it and change things in on time. So the chances of things happening in terms of investments and buying and marketing are very much a part of the new innovation of AR/VR, which will augment the whole process. Experiential selling. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Professor Rob reminded me of something when I was talking about eye rings and eye gloves to help facilitate pointing and clicking cursors in AR or VR. I wanted to say as well we could use voice commands as well. I did forget to say that. And he also mentioned a very important point about socialization of children, or the lack of. Very, very troubling. Anything that affects children that negatively is something I find highly upsetting. But yeah, the Oculus Rift. I remember going to visit a friend at at his house, and they were borrowing an Oculus Rift from someone, and he invited me to try it, and it was amazing. I was blown away. Although I think after an hour, I was starting to feel a bit queasy because you have to fit the visor headset with special lenses that come in different sizes that you have to fit into the visor depending on how long or short-sighted you are, the wearer. And I think we were a bit off, hence why I felt a bit nauseous. But well, we're using an early form of telepresence right now, of course. It's just right now this telepresence interface is limited to audio and video, audio-visual. And I think that interfaces like haptic interfaces and vibrating devices have been experimented with for quite some time now. So that is for the sense of touch, of course, vibrohaptic. So with regards to the total holistic sensorium, these 3 modalities are the easiest modalities to transmit, to connect with over wireless communication stretching across long and short distances. So modalities like olfaction and taste are a bit more awkward to send information wirelessly and digitally to other terminals. Well, that doesn't mean some companies and research teams haven't tried, because some have, and you can find out about some quite exotic gadgets and interfaces that tried to allow people to interface with the olfacto-gustatory modalities. So yeah, we'll see lots of interesting developments in the near future. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually excellent discussions. I request all of our speakers and our audience share our content as much as possible. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye, everyone.